Welcome everyone to Brookline Booksmith's author event series. My name is Silas and I'm a member of the events team here at Brookline Booksmith. If you're familiar with our store, welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, welcome virtually. We're so excited to have you all here this evening to celebrate the release of Lost in the Long March with author Michael X. Wang in conversation with Y.Z. Chin. YZ is the author of Edge Case, a New York Times Editor's Choice and NPR pick for Best Books of 2021. She's also the author of Though I Get Home, winner of the Louise Merriweather First Book Prize. YZ is a MacDowell Fellow and has translated Lisa Shu's The Age of Goodbyes into English. Born and raised in Taiping, Malaysia, she now lives in New York. Michael X. Wang was born in Fenyang, a small coal mining city in China's Shanxi province, and immigrated to the United States when he was 6. He received his MFA in fiction from Purdue University and PhD in literature from Florida State University. His collection, Further News of Defeat, won the 2021 Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for Debut Short Story Collection and the 2022 Great Lakes Colleges Association New Writers Award for Fiction, and was a finalist for the 2021 CLMP Firecracker Award. Lost in the Long March, his newest work, is an epic historical novel set against the tense backdrop of the Long March and Mao's rise to power, and tells a powerful and moving story of two ordinary people. It's set in China in 1934. A naive orphan and shy gunsmith, Ping, has fallen in love with Yang, who is a sophisticated veteran, a skilled marksman, and a true believer in Marxist ideology. Winning her affections will take an ideological battle, and to make matters worse, Yang has shown interest in Ping's best friend, Lua. On the evening of a great communist defeat, Ping sabotages Lua's rifle, causing the bullet to backfire into his friend's head. The army begins its years-long retreat, known as the Long March, and Yang turns to Ping to comfort and companionship. Ping deeply regrets killing his friend, and his relationship with Yang blossoms. As his relationship blossoms, he is saddened that it will always be colored by guilt. Yang soon becomes pregnant. The Red Army can't retreat with a crying infant, so Ping and Yang leave their son with a woman, promising to return once the war is won. When World War II breaks out and Japanese soldiers arrive, their 12-year-old son decides to enlist in the Japanese army to find his parents, though he quickly begins to fear for his life. As Forward Reviews writes, Lost in a Long March is a story about lingering trauma and the price that's paid when ideology trumps love. Here to tell us more, YZ and Michael X. Wang.
Thank you, Silas, for that wonderful introduction, and to Brookline Booksmiths for setting this up. And thank you to everyone who's joining us in this reading. I think I'll just maybe read a little bit from the novel, and then me and YZ will have a conversation about writing, craft, and also China. And then we'll take some questions and answers from you guys. So I'll be reading from two parts of the book. The first is fairly self-contained, and it occurs in the middle of the novel. It even has its own title. It's called The Fable of the Footless Men, and it goes something like this. Thousands of years ago, before the time of emperors, China was divided into many nations and city-states. The wealthy curried favor from local kings by offering gifts. Nobles gave a portion of their harvest. Intellectuals supplied the bounty of military advice or worldly philosophy. And those with neither land nor education had one remaining way to gain favor, possessing something the king personally desired. There were stories of how a blacksmith became a general after he had forged the king's sharpest blade. of how a cowherd became a magistrate after the king had wed his daughter, of how a weaver became a landowner after he had sewed the king's finest gown. Such was the ambition of a lucky jade miner from Hubei. He had spent decades in the quarries without finding anything substantial, and then on his 44th birthday, he struck a prize so large and so fine that only a king could afford it. He shaped it into a lustrous cabbage, smoothing it until the leaves bloomed symmetrically on all sides. Holding it up to the sun, he felt pride when his work lit up like a lantern. It was rumored that, because of its purity, the jade cabbage could capture the light and glow even at night. Confident in its worth, the miner took his prize to the king of Zhou, the most powerful king in the land. He laid the piece at the foot of the throne, his head bowed until the king's advisor finished examining it. The advisor, a sycophant easily moved to jealousy, held the jade cabbage between his long flowing sleeves and worried that such an awe-inspiring object might elevate the miner to a position above even his own. Nothing but a chunk of limestone, he yelled up to the king, who was sitting half asleep behind a silken vial. Dressed up to look like treasure, the thing is worthless. Fine, fine, the king called down. Get the man out of my sight. Your Majesty, the miner pleaded, ask any reputable jeweler. They will confirm the authenticity. I come bearing this gift as your honest servant. Might I suggest a punishment? The advisor grinned at the miner, one fit for a liar. Fine, fine, the king called down. Chop off his right foot so he will be slower and lie to fewer people. And thus the miner lost one of his feet. On crutches, though still confident of the worth of his work, he took his prize to the king of Zheng, the second most powerful king. Again, he laid the piece at the foot of the throne, his head bowed until the jade was examined. This time, the king himself picked up the object, and though he liked its shape, its craftsmanship, he was worried about its origins. I've heard another jade cabbage had come before the king of Zhou. Is this the same one? He asked the miner. The miner nodded. The king of Zhou does not have as keen an eye as you do, my lord. He is not worthy of my prize. I heard a different story. I heard that he rejected the piece because it was nothing more than limestone. The king threw the jade cabbage into the miner's lap. You bring me a gift that my rival has rejected. Are you suggesting that I should accept it because I am lesser than him, that the kingdom of Zheng is second to Zhou? If the object is as magnificent as you say it is, why not bring it to me first? Sire, the miner pleaded, I meant no disrespect. Guards, the king called, get this man out of my sight. Chop off his other foot so that he knows the meaning of loyalty. And thus the miner lost his other foot. With both feet gone, the miner became a beggar. Years later, on the streets of his hometown, a wandering laborer approached the miner who had become a beggar. The laborer glanced at the coins in the shape of knives on the ground, and then at the jade cabbage in the beggar's arm. By this point, the beggar had become an old man. His hair was white, he had grown a gray beard, and his legs were covered with a brown cloth. What makes your life so pathetic that I should give you my hard-earned money? The laborer asked the beggar. The beggar uncovered his right leg and showed his missing foot. I tried giving this jade cabbage to the king of Zhou. He refused it and chopped off my right foot. So the laborer wasn't impressed. Many people have lost their right foot. What makes you so special? The beggar uncovered his other leg and showed that both his feet were missing. Then I tried giving this jade cabbage to the king of Zheng. He refused it as well and chopped off my other foot. So, again, the laborer wasn't impressed. Many people have lost both their feet. I ask a second time, why should I mourn with someone with missing feet? The beggar shook his head. You misunderstand me. I mourn not for my missing feet. I mourn because no one will accept this jade cabbage, my life's work. So that was from the middle of the novel. And I'll read a section towards the end of the book as well. I really appreciate how Silas gave an introduction to the first part of the novel. That will really help in the reading of this part. Basically, all you really need to know is that the year is 1978, right after the death of Mao, when China first opened up to the West. Ping and Young are the main characters, and they encounter a homeless man at the marketplace who may or may not be their long lost child from roughly 40 years ago. Okay. Luxury foods are in high demand, especially during the holidays. Restricted by ration policies, vendors can only sell 3 or 4 items per person, even to someone prominent. Young and Ping need to go to a couple markets if they are to gather enough succulent treats for the orphanage. There are lines wherever they go, but their car and uniform draw the attention of the clerks, who approach with pencil and notepad and ask them what they want. They always pay double the worth of their purchase, both in cash and in food tickets, and repeat the clerk's name when they leave, so he knows they'll remember this small kindness. Young is aware of supply shortages. In winter, even the capital is not immune. Still, pride swells in her heart when she sees that the citizens in line, far from being annoyed, are talking and laughing, pulling their young ones close, checking to see if they are warm. Most have lived through years that were far worse. For some, the memory of a mother buried on an empty stomach is still close enough to make their hands shake. Others are forbidden to speak of dead siblings during mealtime, the very mention of a name causing dinners to go uneaten. Young admits it, things have steadily improved after Mao's death. Following the return of Deng Xiaoping, whose pro-West chairmanship she had initially opposed, the committees have been given greater freedom to act on their own initiative. Schools have reopened, private companies have started springing up. Layers of restrictions prohibiting the enactment of bourgeois policies have been rolled away, and the 4 modernizations, agriculture, industry, technology, and military, are in the process of being implemented. It is here in these marketplaces that Young begins to see the effects of these changes. It is here that she feels her decade-long ideas of a new China finally taking shape. Their last stop of the day, an unofficial and illegal marketplace, lies outside the city limits. Away from the main roads, a bumpy path of wagon tracks and hoof prints lead them to a crumbling, half-enclosed vinegar warehouse. Its roofs filled with holes, the ancient building has been long abandoned by its aristocratic owner, no doubt deceased or made humble. When they approach the central bazaar, mules part and onlookers drop their baskets and stare at their car. The people here are a mix of rural and city folk, those with and without a Beijing birth certificate. They trade crops grown in secrecy, haggle using currency or food tickets, and purchase foreign goods like wristwatches and sunglasses. Driver Bao parks near a trough where pack animals are drinking. Ping and Young open the door. They smell dung and the lye powder that partially covers it. Young tells Driver Bao to wait for them here. We won't be long, Ping says. Here, no merchants will approach their vehicle. They aren't sure if the officials inside have come to buy things or hand out fines. The entrance to the warehouse is a pair of rusty iron doors permanently propped open by 2 mounds of over-poured cement. Ping and Young step through a line of people waiting to purchase pork fat, the man at the front yelling for the butcher to even out the scale before declaring a price. They pass a tofu vendor who eyes them suspiciously, and then a trader of plastic trinkets, water pistols, rubber snakes, colorful balloons, who seems ready at any moment to close his briefcase and run away. It is not until they have walked sufficiently into the building, when Ping takes out his wallet in front of a candied peanut stall, that the other merchants drop their guard and stop glancing in Ping's direction. 2 kilograms, Ping says. After paying the man, Young points to another booth where cans of lychee are stacked. They scurry over to the other stall like school children, nearly tripping on a loose brick. The seller, a woman who claims to have traveled all the way from the southern provinces, spoons a sample into each of their palms. Very sweet, she says, came from my village. Ping can tell from her Cantonese accent she's telling the truth. 5 cans, he says. Rolling the sweet fruit around her tongue, Young nudges her husband with her elbow. No, Ping corrects himself, make that 10. By the time they finish shopping, their arms are so full, driver Bao has to snuff out his cigarette and rush over to pick up the items that have fallen. Opening the trunk, he helps them throw in the spoils, enough delicacies to fill the bellies of 100 orphans who haven't tasted oily or sweet foods in months. When driver Bao closes the trunk, Ping and Young notice a man sitting next to the pack animals. Illuminated by the midday sun, he has his legs crossed and is washing his long, unkempt hair with water from the trough. He washes with one hand because he only has one hand. His other sleeve, tied into a knot, dangles from his shoulder. As he washes, the stump hits the trough's metal wall, the thwacks reverberating like jolts of thunder. They do not know who has spotted the man first, but when they look at each other, they both have the same question. How long has he been there? Ping asks driver Bao. That bum, Bao says, he came up to me just after you went inside, asked for food. You want me to tell him to get lost, sir? Ping shakes his head. He has Bao open the trunk again. Young grabs a pouch full of peanuts and a can of lychee, and together they walk toward the stranger. The man is an unusual sight. Beggars are not allowed within city limits, and although the unofficial marketplace is technically outside Beijing, men like the one before them still risks being rounded up by the police and thrown in prison. He must have come from out of town, possibly out of the province, and he must have just arrived. When Ping and Young get close, they notice the man is whistling a tune. They don't recognize the language. Is he a foreigner? His pitch changes from high to low often, sometimes within a single word. Is he Mongolian, Russian, perhaps from the conquered regions of Tibet? No, the man does not have the bald head of a monk, nor brown locks, nor the feral features of the Soviets. Where does his music, which is becoming more familiar with every passing note, come from? Excuse me, Ping says. The stranger stops his washing and uses his one hand to spin himself around. He blinks rapidly, water dripping down dense brows. After his eyes focus, he becomes startled, waving his arm about. I'm not a beggar, he declares. Please don't take me away. I only look haggard because I've been walking for so long, never had a moment to wash until now. And I wouldn't be using this trough if the merchants weren't so stingy. They charge me a fen per use of their sink, and I only want to wash my face. Ping can't place his accent. Like his singing, it is familiar. Ping is hopeful, but his years of searching have made him hesitant, pessimistic, self-doubting. Surely Old Man in the Sky does not play tricks like this. It is too easy, surely, for this stranger to be his son. Stand up, Young says. No, please, don't do this. I beg you. The man begins to sob. He shifts his body forward, reaches his arm up, and tugs on Young's pants. His weeping turns to bawling. Tears come fast, flowing from his face like water from a faucet. And in an instant, the man is the epitome of pathos, the essence of tragedy distilled down to its elemental particles. The atoms, a word Ping learned after the war, of wretchedness. We're not here to nab you. Ping shakes the pouch of peanuts and a can of lychee. Would someone who's trying to nab you carry these? The man, still not entirely convinced, stands up. He does not dare look them in the eye, and he continues to sniffle. Even this close, they have trouble determining his age. His hair covers a large portion of his forehead and cheeks, and they are not sure which streaks on his face are wrinkles and which are dirt and grime. He smells like he just woke up from sleeping in a bed of fermenting cabbage. Where are you from? Yung asks. The man doesn't answer. Perhaps he thinks the question is a trick. After all, anything he says might condemn him. That song you were whistling, it's not from these parts, is it? Ping asks. It is, the man nods fiercely. It's from Beijing, maybe not from the city, but I learned it around the neighboring countryside. I swear I'm allowed to be here. Ping shakes his head. Don't be afraid. Pay no attention to our uniforms. I promise you, we're not after you. He asks Yung to open the pouch of peanuts. Then he takes one out and offers it. The man pops it, shell and all, into his mouth. Yung tells him to have some more. With sidelong glances, he stuffs 2 handfuls of nuts into oversized pockets. The stitching of the pockets are rough and the brown fabric does not match the rest of the coat. Take the entire pouch, Ping says. The man hurriedly wraps up the pouch and jams it into one pocket. Yung holds out the can of lychee and the man crams it into his other pocket, the peanuts underneath crunching from the pressure. The song's from Sichuan, he finally admits, where I grew up, but I'm from a part neither of you have heard of. Try us, Yung says. It has no name. The man smiles, all trace of tears having vanished. Throwing another peanut into his mouth, he bobbles his head triumphantly. Or maybe it has a name, but I don't remember. Yung turns to Ping, and for what feels like a long time, they stare at each other. They are asking, did we hear the man correctly? Did he say Sichuan? Can this be our little turnip, our young leaf, once green and vibrant, blown down the mountaintop and returned to us a little wilted, a touch brown, but still ours all the same? Is the man before us an apparition, a trick of the light, someone only we can see? Should we dare to believe? They have many more questions, but it is unwise to talk to the homeless man for too long in public. People are interested in anything out of the ordinary, and a long conversation might draw a crowd. Onlookers might wonder why these officers have not arrested the man, and such speculation can cause the situation to become unnecessarily complex. Have you ridden in a car before? Ping asks. Not in the back of some carriage or atop a mule, but inside a 4-wheeled vehicle whose only purpose is bringing its passengers around in warmth and comfort. The man shakes his head, staring over Ping's shoulder at the shiny black car. You want to? Ping asks. No tricks, no traps. A spring festival present, Yung says. The man runs to the other side of the trough. For a moment, their hearts sink. But he's only reaching for his belongings, a bulging burlap sack tied to a tree branch, and then he is back. They lead him to the car. Driver Bao opens the door. He cannot contain a scoff when peanut shells spill from the man's pocket and the man's branch scratches the upholstery. Ping sits up front. Annoyed, Driver Bao asks Ping what their next destination is, and Ping tells him that they are going home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. That was completely absorbing, so engrossing. I really admire like your eye for details. You have such brilliant details in your prose, like the can of lychees crushing the peanut shells, the peanuts underneath, and then later they like spill out of his pocket when he's getting in the car. It's beautiful stuff. So I just wanted to start off by congratulating you on your beautiful novel, Lost in the Long March. It's wonderful, and I'll just dive right in because I do have a lot of questions for you. So you mentioned earlier before you started reading, you said Ping and Yong are the book's main characters, but in fact the book is divided into sections. 2 of them are sort of like close third person follows of Ping and Yong's stories, their experiences. But there are other sections that follow Little Turnip, and then there's a section from which you read the first part of your reading that is in first person, which follows Haiwu, Ping and Yong's comrade and friend in the army. So I know the structure may seem a little unusual for quote unquote Western literature, but it might be a little more common in Chinese literature. For example, the weaving of voices, stories within stories, things like that. So I wanted to ask you, what does this structure mean to you?
That's a really brilliant question. Thank you for the kind words too, YZ. And YZ has many successes in her work too. Her translation, The Age of Innocence, it has just come out. It came out in the same day as the novel, in fact, which is a happy coincidence. I think that's a wonderful question. I was writing the novel, writing the first draft of the novel. One of my professors, they read a very early draft of it, and he asked me, why is Haiwu still lingering around? Like why? Like he should just be a character that just comes and goes. Why is he becoming ever increasingly more important as the novel progresses? And there's something that kind of intrigues me about Haiwu. He kind of represents this like humorous traditional kind of Chinese culture. I mean, he's I think with communist China and with all of those rapid changes from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, like the last 100 years has been just dramatic changes for Chinese culture in general. I think with all of that, Chinese culture has in some ways like held on to its tradition, but in other ways it has become something kind of unrecognizable as well. And I think Chaiwu kind of represents that sort of this person who is both hanging on but also kind of adaptable to maybe this kind of modern society. Without giving anything away, he becomes kind of the most successful of the main characters towards the end of the novel. Well, at least the most happy, I can say. And so I find that to be very intriguing, and in some ways, it kind of speaks to maybe the spirit of the Chinese population in some senses. I mean, we've gone through so many kind of struggles and turmoils, and we are continuing to go through a lot of really hard stuff right now, especially with the political situation, with Xi Jinping kind of taking on power for good, for life, it almost seems. And Chinese media, Chinese voices being increasingly censored and repressed. So with all of that stuff going on, I think Haiwu as a character kind of embodies that kind of just humorous spirit. Like he keeps on struggling, but he also just takes all of these things that come at him with humor and with grace, and he survives. And he's a good kind of contrasting character to Young and Ping, who have really lost, both their son, but also maybe a part of what it means to be Chinese when Chinese became a communist country. But Haiwu maybe has retained a little bit of that. So I find him just a really intriguing character. And I think the most intriguing characters in some ways should be written in the first person, because I just want to hear their voice. I mean, as a writer, I'm curious just to hear what they sound like.
No, that makes total sense, and I love that answer. Like, why write in first person? If you're not, because you're occupying more directly their voice, and that makes a lot of sense. And for me too, I think the structure, the chorus, if you will, is an effective reminder that in history, any historical event causes upheaval for thousands to millions of people. It's not just, Mao decided this and then Chiang Kai-shek reacted this way, and then it's like battle of two men. It's not that. There's like so many lives swept up, in any single passage we read in a history book. So I love that the structure sort of reminds us of that. And I'm curious about your research process too, because in the acknowledgement, let me find it so make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth. You said that you knew little about China's past outside of the stories your parents and grandparents had told you. And so was your research sort of like a blend of stories from your family and research, academic research you did on your own? And what did it look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a challenging question, right? As a writer of historical fiction, it's kind of like how much research should we do? What kind of research should we do? Should we do research while we are writing or before it? You know, should we only research after we finish the draft? I think for me, you know, in some ways, the impetus of the book was just knowing what my parents were talking about. Because as I was growing up, they would tell me these, like they would reference these like weird things, like the Cultural Revolution, like the Great Leap Forward, like Chiang Kai-shek, like Mao, like all of those kind of pinnacle moments in Chinese history in the last 100 years. And for the longest time, up until the writing of this novel, I had just very cursory knowledge of all the stuff that they're referring to. And I think the process of research was just finding what the hell they were they were talking about for my entire childhood days. When my parents-in-law came and visited me a couple of years ago, they brought these like propaganda radio programs from China from the 1980s. It was called Iron Meets Fire, and they were just about how just any like communist propaganda thing, like how powerful these communist troops were, and what their victories looked like, and whatever. And I think some of those details really really intrigued me, and those stories were very engaging, and I wanted to know how much was propaganda, how much was true, how much is fact. So I went and did a lot of research. Well, first I kind of started writing the novel just based on my cursory knowledge of the period. I wrote about 20 pages just to try to find the voice of the novel, just to see if I can do it. Like if I can't find the voice, if I can't find a way of telling the story, it's, in some ways, no matter how much knowledge I have of the period, it just becomes almost impossible for me to write it. So once I've found that it's a possibility, like I can imbue the voice of Ping and whatnot, then I went and kind of immersed myself or submerged myself in the literature, in the research for a couple of months, making notes of like, I really want to include this detail, I really want to include that detail. So that kind of list of notes was like 20-30 pages. And then once I did that, I tried my best to kind of forget all of that stuff, like forget my research, because in some ways you need to let your creative mind emerge afterwards. Sometimes you can be stifled. I would kind of go through my notes if I'm stuck on a particular detail. Well, I mean, when I'm writing a first draft, if I don't have a good detail, I would just like put in brackets, insert good detail here for the next draft. So I had like plenty of those.
Oh, I think you might be frozen. Is that just me, or is that for
I think
everyone else?
that's Michael
Okay.
being frozen, but that's okay. This happens. So we'll just ask folks to be patient for a moment. Oftentimes, folks will just come back.
Yeah.
This is unfortunately there.
Oh, yeah. We're back.
Better now?
Yes. I think just to like catch us up, I think you were talking about how you would do research and then set it aside while you wrote. You would leave brackets for yourself to insert details later, because you found that helped your writing process. And then I think shortly after that you froze.
Oh yeah, because I think yeah, thank you so much for that update. I was remembering how just if you do too much research and you try to do it exactly like how you read it or read about it, it might stifle your creativity. It might you might go a certain direction that's based on the research, but it wouldn't be interesting as a compelling plot, as a compelling story. So yeah, I have all of these kind of things like in a first draft, insert great detail here, and then when I'm revising, I would go and look through my notes and try to find some of those great details. Hopefully some, hopefully never.
No, I love that, and I really like that approach. I think it's powerful, and it sort of enhances the creative writing, but maybe enhances the wrong word. But it's just like sometimes when I read certain historical fiction books, you sort of get the sense that the writer did a ton of research and they really want their work, they don't want the work to be for nothing. So they're sort of like cramming every little detail that they've researched and found fascinating into the work, whether it really fits or is in service of the characters, the plot, or not. And yeah, I just find your details both sort of sparing but also lush, which is really, really wonderfully done. But and I also find it so fascinating. Your research is like almost like corroborating your what your family told you. It's like I there should be a word for this kind of process where it's like a combination of like dinner table conversation and like interlibrary loans. I don't
Yeah,
know, but it's like a new style of research or something.
yeah.
But I wanted to go back to what you said earlier when you were talking about Haiwu, which is you feel like his character represents, or is a character who sort of represents the attempt to retain the tenacity of retaining something Chinese that might have been lost in the revolution. And I want to ask you what you meant by that. Like, what is being
Mm.
Chinese for you?
Wow, that is a really difficult question. But what does it mean to be Chinese to me? And I think being Chinese for me is maybe different than being Chinese for a person in China, or for you, someone who grew up in Malaysia, but ethnically Chinese and then coming to the United States. I think for me, being Chinese is there's something about being Chinese and work ethic. I think that kind of ties together. When I was younger, when I was like in grade school, when I was in high school, even parts of college, I think as an immigrant, as like a young child who immigrated to a new country, there's always that resistance to like embrace your traditional culture, where your parents are from, right? It kind of like fights one another. Like in school, like we're Americanized, and the kids, they tell us, drink ice water, and eat American food, eat burgers and whatnot. But at home, if I drank ice water, my parents would just be appalled. So it's always like hot water. It's always like eating with chopsticks, with Chinese food, that kind of stuff. So in the beginning, these two warring factions, like American culture won, because as kids, right, we were always influenced by our friends more so than our parents. And I feel like I didn't really appreciate kind of my Chinese-ness in a sense. But as I gotten older and older, I think I've kind of gotten to appreciate that more. And it's kind of like I can, if I'm tired of American culture, I can retreat to Chinese culture. If I'm tired of Chinese culture, I can retreat to American culture. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds in a sense. But there is something about Chineseness and history. I think like Chinese people, they take like a great pride in their history. Like some of the characters in like Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's just everybody knows, right? Like everybody knows those characters in that literature. And there's something about that, this kind of this thousands of years of suffering creating this modern Chinese culture. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but there's this but you know, that's what I got.
Yeah, no, sorry, that was a hardball. So you have a PhD. You obviously know how to do research. You are a scholar, but you are also now a novelist, a writer of historical fiction. I wanted to ask you, what do you think historical fiction can do that nonfiction can't? Like, you know, if somebody wanted to learn about the Long March, presumably they would, you know, go read a Wikipedia article or something. I'm not asking you to defend your book. I'm genuinely
No,
interested in how you feel about this. Yeah.
that's a fantastic question too. Like when I think of history, I think of and you know, people's opinions on certain historical times. There is this kind of collective thought, right? This collective consciousness of that time in history. And I think in some ways, like fiction is able to maybe transcend what we thought of that part of history. I think maybe with nonfiction, a lot of the times it's about the big players, right? It's about, you know, Julius Caesar or whoever, you know, and the people who are kind of average everyday citizens, they don't get their, you know, day to shine. I think it is it's fiction's job to create these really, really intimate moments that non-fan almost never sort of know. You know, I mean, they can surmise. Is my internet connection bad? Did it hiccup for a second there?
A little bit.
Okay.
But I think we got the gist of what you were saying.
Okay. Yeah. I think like in fiction, we're given a lot more room to create intimate moments between characters who are living through a certain historical moment, whereas you know, nonfiction needs to stick to the big players, the big events. But I mean, I find it amazing that people were still, you know, as these big events were happening, people were still eating dinner, they were still going shopping, they were still, you know, living their lives, and they didn't know they were living through history until decades later, if ever they realized it. So I think maybe that's something that fiction offers that perhaps nonfiction, like, I'm not going to say it's impossible for nonfiction to offer that, but a lot more difficult, and it requires a lot more surmising. I don't know.
No, I love that answer. It's beautiful. I think we have a couple questions in the chat, so I'll pass over.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, I'm back.
Hi, Fellas.
Yeah, we've got some questions from Mark. I know one that I saw was talking about your future work, and I know that you have two things that you're working on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's coming up?
Yeah, I would love to. So I'm almost done with my second novel. I technically should have been done a couple weeks ago, but I'm still in the process of writing it. I have about 10 more pages left to write, I think, and then some revision of the last part. It's called The Red Synthetic Utopia of the Mind. It's more speculative in nature. It deals with video game culture. It deals with immigration. The main character, her name is Harriet Chu, and she is this video game prodigy that comes to the United States on a video game visa, and she works for this artificial intelligence corporation playtesting with their supercomputer, and then she gets she like merges minds with the supercomputer, and time really slows down. The supercomputer, he's like this emergent consciousness, and he's able to kind of change the world so that America and China's role switches places. America becomes a third world country and China becomes a first world country. So that is my next project, and that is almost done. And I'm working on well, once that is done, I'm going to work on my third novel, which is already kind of, I've written the synopsis, I planned it all out. It's called Jeff Bezos is the First Emperor of China. And it is just as crazy as it sounds. Basically, 30 years in the future, Jeff Bezos has made Amazon an even bigger corporation, a global kind of conglomerate. And he's in his 90s. Like anyone in who's old, he wants to remain living forever. He's searching for immortality. Because Amazon is so wealthy, he's kind of has these research facilities all around the world. And he discovers he discovers time travel in the jungles of Vietnam. He's also invented these race-changing technology. So his big plan is he makes himself Asian. And then he travels back thousands of years ago to the first emperor, to Emperor Qin Shi Huang. And there's this rumor in Chinese culture that Qin Shi Huang was looking for and then found the elixir to immortality. So that's why he went back to become the first emperor. But he went back, he becomes the first emperor of China. He drinks the elixir of immortality. And basically, he builds up China's corrupt bureaucracy using all of his skills learned from running Amazon for all of those decades. So that is the third project that I'm working on, and those are the two books that hopefully will see the light of day.
That's amazing. From historical fiction to speculative, what can't you do?
Yeah, I think it's great to push your boundaries as a writer and just write as much as you can, follow where your mind goes, and that's so great. So Mark got lots of questions. He also asks what you're reading right now. Perhaps both of you can answer that, and any advice from both of you for people looking to follow in your shoes.
Maybe I'll let YZ answer that first, and then I'll answer it afterwards.
I don't have it with me. I'm reading a book originally written in Japanese. It's called The Forest Brims Over by Maru Ayase, translated by Hayden Trowell. It's coming out next summer, I want to say, from Catapult, which is a great indie publisher.
Yeah.
But it's about a woman who is married to a well-known novelist, and she's his muse, and he sort of models a lot of his books, characters on her, and writes like sort of highly sexualized accounts of her, and she like is fed up of her sort of passive role in his life, and decides to become a forest. Like she just swallows some seed and starts sprouting leaves and branches and just keeps going, like taking over the town. It's wonderful. It's like surreal, but also feels really familiar in certain ways. You know what I mean?
That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm reading YZ Chen's Edge Case right now. I think the voice is fabulous, and I have The Age of Goodbye is ordered. I don't know why I called it The Age of Innocence. I'm so sorry before. I also just finished reading this story collection called Origami Dogs by Noli Reed. She asked me to write a blurb for her story collection. It's a really, really great story collection. It has the through line of pets. Like there's like, I mean, all of the stories are kind of really sad, really brutal. It's about these relationships, and how we as human beings, we screw up all of our relationships. But like the animals are constantly and watching us and kind of shaking their heads at how we are able to screw up our relationships. So Noli Read Story Collection is really wonderful. But yeah, those are some of the stuff I'm reading currently.
And any advice from both of you for future writers trying to get published, perhaps?
I would say, with social media, there's like a ton of often competing writing advice or clashing writing advice. Take what works for you, take what resonates, sort of ignore the rest. And I know there's a lot of pressure to write every day or often. And I guess I'm here to tell you what worked for me, which might not work for you, just repeating what I said earlier. But what worked for me was just thinking about the writing counts as writing. So writing in my head, I wrote my first book when I was working full-time. So the actual butt in seat, typing, staring at blank Word document time was very little or very limited. But there's like a sort of perverse joy I had from going to work and supposed to be working and getting paid to do stuff for other people. But secretly in my head, I was thinking about plot and characters and scenes. And I think that's really helpful when you do get that butt in seat time, because you already have a sense of what you're going to do. It's not like that dreadful, oh my gosh, here's a blank page. So I would say if you don't get that butt in seat time every day, that's okay. Just try to be in the world of your writing as much as possible. And that I will say that counts as writing.
I absolutely agree. I think that's kind of fantastic. So as you were programming, you were writing in your head. Do they take different spaces in your head so you can do it as you were programming? I find that really, really fascinating.
Yeah, if only we were as neat. I wish, computers or robots. Excuse me. No, I think when you're programming, sometimes there's downtime. So when you, for certain programming languages, you have to compile them, which is when the the computer is sort of packaging. I'm grossly simplifying here, but taking all these disparate instructions that you've given them and putting it all together, and it takes time depending on how large the program is. It could take I don't know, up to 10 minutes. So there's chunks of the day when you have you can just watch stuff flow on your screen while your head is filled with other other things, and it looks like you're doing work, or whatever it is. You can be you can spend 20 minutes longer than necessary to write an email. Your fingers are just pause, and you have a thoughtful look on your face.
That's hilarious. Yeah. I would echo that advice. When you do kind of sit in front of your computer, if you have thought about it enough, then it would come at least a little bit easier, right? Because literally, as we are writing a novel, we have to both create the world, we have to think about what the next detail would be, we have to think about the sentences, and is it grammatically correct? Is it working voice-wise with the character, and all of that kind of stuff. So the more kind of pre-writing that you can do, the more kind of questions of what's going to happen next, what my character wants, that kind of stuff that you can do beforehand, the slightly easier that it can get when you do start to write. And I think there's kind of other kind of tricks that I found as well. I think for me, the most powerful brainstorming periods are when I'm taking a shower. I don't know if you've experienced this, but when you're taking a shower, I feel like all of those water hitting your body, it kind of stimulates more creativity. Like your mind just seems to be lit up when that happens. And when I'm stuck on something that I'm working on, when I really don't know how to go about writing this next scene, rather than just pause there for 20 or 30 minutes in my seat, I would just go and take a walk. I think for some reason, if I'm sitting in front of a computer, sometimes ideas just don't come to me for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but when I'm walking, suddenly all of these ideas just come. So I think, do something physical that helps stimulate the mind. And also, I think just not be super hard on yourself either. There's going to be times where you're writing and you're wondering if it's good, and you're wondering if anyone will read it. You're wondering if it will get published, and those are good questions, but not the questions that you should be having at the moment that you're kind of writing. I think the short story writer Richard Bausch, he said that we can only tell ourselves that we've worked hard for that day in our writing. We can't punish ourselves for writing, quote unquote, bad or something that day. It's just, if we sat down and we worked, and that work could be just thinking about it, that work could be just, brainstorming and taking a walk, looking at computer programming while, things are going on in our head. But yeah, that kind of counts as work. And as long as we kind of sat down and really thought hard or written words, then it's fine. Enough of those sessions, enough of that time, and sooner or later we'll have a novel or we'll have a book, is my belief anyway.
Absolutely. About the shower thing, maybe it's like primordial, like back when we all crawled out of the ocean.
Yeah.
Like when we were unformed and the most creative,
Yeah.
if you will. But I also really love something that I heard secondhand from the writer Jeremy Tiang, which is maybe more of us writers should, I'm paraphrasing, should think of, have more affinity with how bakers think about their jobs, which is, it's very focused on how good can I make this particular bread in my hands for today, for someone to enjoy today. Like it's maybe too much pressure for most of us to like sit down and try to write, the great whatever novel that will last for the next 1,000 years. But it's more helpful to think of, okay, I am making something good right now today with what I have at my disposal.
Right. I mean, it's especially young writers, they try to do kind of everything at the same time. They try to make this next novel or even this short story just encompassing their soul. And it's like, well, it doesn't have to be that. Just write, do something small, do something quiet, just tell a story, like a simple story, but you make it interesting. It doesn't need to encompass everything. And the more you write, the less you need to have it encompass everything, right? If you've only written 5 short stories, then everything that you write is like 1/5 of your total output. So it's going to put a lot of pressure on the next piece. But if you've written like 20 short stories, and if you've written a bunch of novels or novel drafts or whatever, then even if the next one fails or you need to rewrite it, then it's only going to represent a section of kind of your total output as a writer.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing that advice, and I'm dropping the link to buy Michael's new book in the chat, and you can buy it on this page up until 9 a.m. tomorrow, or always on brooklinebooksmith.com, of course. Thank you to both of you, Michael and YZ, for being here this evening, and thank you to all of our attendees. And we wish everyone a wonderful night.
Thanks for hosting, and thank you for this book, Michael.
Thank you so much, YZ, for just talking with me and chatting.
Yeah.